I help people focus on creating new beginnings because I know just how important it is to each of you to establish clarity and security for your family in the future. My name's John Zenner. I'm a family law attorney. And today I want to talk to you about the one thing, the only thing that's the most important if you have to take your family law or divorce law case into court. And that one thing is the thing that's important to the people you're in front of, the judge. And that is my case filled with legally sufficient items? And by what do I mean by that? I mean the items that the court is going to be concerned about. They're not going to be concerned about how hurt you are by the fact that your spouse no longer loves you. But what they're going to be concerned about are things that are within the law, and you know where to look for them, and you know who to ask, and that's your lawyer. The first thing you need to talk about isn't legally sufficient is where are those items found? Well, first of all, it's found within the statutes, the laws that the people write who are in the state legislature about divorce and custody and child support. So make sure you know what those laws are so you know what's legally sufficient. The second place that you'll find that information is in the case law that's been had previously. Make sure you talk to your attorney as to what case law supports your case, your situation, whether it's legally sufficient or not. The third area is with administrative rulings. And the best example I can give with that is every state has a Department of Motor Vehicles. They're an administrative body. They get to make rules and regulations about what driving is, what's good driving, what's bad driving. So you might need 11 points on your license today to lose your license, but they can change that at any time and make it 9 or make it 14. So, for example, every year or so, they change the amount of money that is utilized for the minimum amount of child support when they're awarding child support. So think 2 words only: legally sufficient. What is it? How do I find it? And how can I prove it to the court? Secondly, today, what I wanted to do is to share with you some things that seemingly may be legally sufficient, but may not be. So I'm going to put them in the form of a question to you. First of all, I'm going to give you this hypothetical. A man and a woman get married. 20 years later, they get divorced, and the woman's engagement ring went from like $250, and now 20 years later, it's worth $60,000. Is that marital property or is that separate property? You have to answer the question, not me. I already know. Okay, but you need to talk to somebody who can tell you whether it is or not. I see someone has answered the question that it is not marital property, and they're right, it's not. An engagement ring is always separate property. The second example of legally sufficient that I want to ask you about is the following question about paternity. A couple wind up having a child together. They're not married. When they're in the hospital and after, the father never, ever, ever signs what's called the acknowledgement of paternity. 5 years later, they live together happy as a clam. Okay. And 5 years later, he no longer wants to be with the mother, and the mother wants child support. He says, "No, you're not getting any because I never signed that acknowledgement of paternity." Is that a legally sufficient position? I think I see Kathy has the right answer. Kathy is 100% right. It is not a legally sufficient position for the reason that it depends on whether or not he has held himself out as being the father of the child. So in that case, there's only one question, and it would be even if the parties were married. Married or unmarried doesn't make any difference. Does that 6-year-old child know that man to be the parent? That's a rule called equitable estoppel, which is legally sufficient. The third example I want to throw out to you is child support. Couple are married, they get divorced, they've got 3 kids. The wife has $500,000 in income. The husband makes $50,000. Well, some people told me, said, there's no way this guy has to pay support when in fact the wife makes 10 times as much. Is that a legally sufficient position? Cindy's right, it's not. The fact of the matter is, it makes no difference what the wife earns. It's strictly based upon what the husband earns in terms of paying child support. So if you would like to base your case on that which is legally sufficient evidence so you can win, give me a call and we'll be happy to set up a strategy session to discuss your options moving forward with a legally sufficient case, which is what judges want to hear.